we suggested that in that one that our purpose was to make passionate followers of Jesus Christ who would be sold by our community, gathering over Jesus' command to make disciples. We call those passionate followers of Jesus Christ. Go back a couple of weeks and get the recording of that. So that was why do we exist. Then last week we looked at how will we do that? What will be the nature of how we go? And we said, actually, that wasn't vision, that was values, and the nature of what we'll do will always include a willingness to grow personally and also grow as a church, but also that we will pray, that we will intentionally connect with other people, and that we will reach out to people who are not part of our church. Just because they don't attend here on a Sunday doesn't mean that we don't have a response to them, irrespective of whether they come or not, that we will reach out in love. We said, no matter where we're going, those kind of aspects are always going to characterise. But today we look at the topic of vision. And vision is about destination. And that was the drama today, was trying to get John to kind of go, look, you've got to ask about destination. And even though he thought that limited your options, the kind of go, if you don't know where we're heading, why would you join either that church or get on that train or that group? And so this is part of what we wanted. That was the whole point of what we wanted to create out of that drama. And let me say, Jesus often pointed towards his destination. Now, I've used a couple of Bible readings, and there's a number of others that could have been used. First one we showed was the kids, where the story of Jesus still in the storm. Now, if you've ever been in a boat in rough water, it's scary. I love boats, but there have been times where I've been really nervous. I've been outside the heads of Sydney and have broken down and in boats in fairly heavy seas. And as much as I love it can be scary. So Jesus' disciples are quite scared. Some of them are experienced boatsmen, fishermen, who are fearing for their life, and Jesus is snoozing. And you notice that the reports, he says, don't you even care that we're going to drown. It was such a scary experience that those people actually started questioning Jesus' integrity and love and care. And he steps up and he kind of, I'd really like Jesus to kind of put an arm around him and think, oh, poor people, you're scared and, kind of. And he does, and he turns around and says, oh, you have little faith. And I think, cut them a break. That's a harsh word. So why does he criticise their faith? Because there's fear? I want to suggest that if they'd gone back, he'd already indicated to them what was going to happen. He said, let's get in the boat, we're crossing to the other side of the way. In Jesus' mind, that was never in question. The passage, be it rough or calm, never really didn't matter in one sense, because he had declared where we're going. I think the lack of faith was not, don't you believe I'm strong enough? It's, did you forget? I already said this is settled. We're heading to the other side of the way. There's ministry to do there, and there's a whole story. So I want to suggest that story talks about destination as one of the elements. Yes, there's the majesty of Jesus. I love that little cartoon where they have Jesus still in the storm and he goes, shh. I think the kids would understand that. So there's one instance. The story or the passage that Claire read to us is another illustration where Jesus actually tells his disciples, it comes off that passage where Jesus says, who do people say I am? Who do you say I am? Peter says, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And he says, Peter, you're not smart enough on your own to work that out. God's revealed that. And then when he starts to talk about what's going to happen, Peter says, no, that can't happen. And Jesus, to the person he just affirmed, says, get behind me, Satan. Tough call. I bet that got his attention. And part of it, and not very few people ever realise, particularly in this stage, but there comes a time, in John's Gospel, it transitions about halfway through the book, where Jesus turns his face towards Jerusalem, his arrest, his trial, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. Half of the book of John actually captures that last time, the last phase. And that wasn't read from John, that was read from Mark. But we have that situation where Jesus starts to say, my destination is not what you hope for. My destination involves pain and fear and sadness, even though it will come out well in the end. And so he starts to constantly try and get his disciples to realise that the destination, when it gets tough, it doesn't mean the destination is not still the destination. And there's numerous, other situations. Mark chapter 1 has Jesus healing and casting out demons one evening. The next morning he's been away praying. His disciples said, hey, there's lots more work for you to do than what you've done the night before. And he says, no, we're going somewhere else because that's what I've been called to do. That's my destination, to preach the good news, not in one town, not to become a local physician and miracle worker, but to do more than just heal and cast out demons. And he has a destination, he has a vision in mind that helps him to make decisions that others often struggle to make in the absence of a vision. Most of you probably know, but for those that don't, I spent a decade working for the Baptist Association, working with the 350 churches across New South Wales, and one of the things I probably did more proportionally than any other aspect of my ministry was to help churches vision, to help churches to actually ask, where is God calling us to go? And that was my first connection with this church back in 2017, really, to work with the church. And I don't know, for those of you that were around, I used this very slide, because I pulled it out of the PowerPoint I used. I don't know whether you can see that, but what it is, it uses the analogy of a train. If you imagine a church, or this church, as a train, trains are guided by two rails. One of those rails is purpose. Why do we exist? And it's the same for every other church. We're not the only church called to make disciples, are we? We hold that in common with everyone else. The second rail that gives guidance is what we call values. And this is where we will be similar but have some unique flavour. This is a little bit where the uniqueness of the church comes out. And our values, and we said our values, those ones we talked about, are quite, they would be held across many churches. But some of our other values we've talked about is being fairly relaxed. So this is about as dressed up as you will find me. And if you come in January, it's shorts and a t-shirt, not for the weak-hearted and the weak-stomached. But you know, it's fairly relaxed. We have lots of children who take part in services from time to time. So that's part of who we are. That's how we will travel. There are some churches that people who aren't really proficient at an aspect of ministry would never be seen on stage. That's not who we are. That doesn't mean we're right and others are wrong. It just says that's the flavour of where and how we'll travel. Purpose and values give you rails to keep you centred. But vision asks the question of where are we going? And I was using that illustration many years ago, and the guy said, so vision is like, if you're using the train, he said, that's like the next station. I thought that's brilliant. And that's why, if you could probably read that, the station it's coming up to is called vision. It's about where we are not yet at, but God is calling us to go to. The others can describe how we are at the moment. Are we disciple making? Yes, we are. Are we praying? Yes, we are. Are we connecting? Yes, we are. But vision says, where does God want to take us in the future? I could also illustrate it if you want another story that talks about vision is the people of God coming out of Egypt, I would say their purpose was to be where God said, I will be your God and you will be my people. That's eternal. That didn't change, did it? And how were they to live? When they got out to Sinai, God gave them the Ten Commandments. He said, this is the way you will live no matter where you are, and it will show you a distinct flavour. But their vision of where God was taking them was to a land of milk and honey, a promised land. If we went, let's say, 50 years later, so they've wandered the desert for 40 years, they've started to settle down in the promised land, was their vision still to go to the promised land? The answer is no. Because vision has a time frame on it. It has a time frame. In the next period of time, God is calling us to do that. Their next vision was to occupy the land, and they did that over the following years. And then when they occupied the land, God was saying, I want you to kind of cleanse it. I want you to get rid of the idolatry and the false practices. And so the vision of what God is calling us to do next changes over time. Does that make sense? Just like if you're on a, you might say, I'll never catch a train again because I got on a train, it went down the tracks and I reached a station. We go, good on you. What's the next station? And that's the kind of thing that we have. So, if I go to this slide, again, taken from what I used back in 2017 as a definition of what vision is. Vision is our next destination. It's a word picture of what we think the future might look like under God. And here's the principle. Vision is imparted by God, it's discovered through prayer, and it's acknowledged by the church body. That works in Baptist churches and churches that are like Baptist churches that acknowledge by the church body. Other churches say, no, it's the leaders, pastors, to say where we're going. That's not the way we operate. That's not meant to be a judgment on other churches. So when churches talk about their vision, they're talking about what's the next destination for the next time period. And ideally, it's not the leader's vision. And I would say it's not even the church's vision. It's actually God's vision. Okay? But that's often confusing because often the leaders or the pastor or the church will be involved in raising it as we're doing right now and presenting the options. And so we are the vision casters, but we're trying to articulate what we believe God is saying. And today we're doing a little bit of that. I'm going to share some stuff with you. I'll explain where it came to. I don't have a vision statement for us to sign off on. Because today, what you wrote on the first part of your paper and what you'll write at the end of this message is part of that listening process to say, as the leaders, as the leadership have asked this question, here are some of the pieces of the puzzle, and you probably have some of those pieces in your hearts and your minds as well. And we invite you into that process. So again, that's there. I want to let you know just some of the stuff that we're putting together in that. So the concept or the importance of vision came out of some of my journaling, which I will read to you in a few moments. So one of it is, as I was speaking with God, as I was listening to what God might say in my devotional Sabbath time, a strong sense of God saying you need to articulate vision, as I was praying about how we move forward this year. So there's my journaling. Then on New Year's Eve, we had a prayer event in the evening for about 3 or 4 hours, and one of the exercises we did was a thing called Dare to Dream. In the midst of that, we took about 20 minutes and just asked, we took time to wait, we took time to say, what do you think God is placing as a possible dream? So we've got a list of that, and I actually printed that in our Keeping Connected and shared that with you a couple of weeks ago. So we've got my dream, my journaling, the Dare to Dream event. Another thing that I looked at last week were we had some prayer blocks. They looked like big Jenga. And as in the prayer evening, we just said, write the person or the group you're praying for on one side of it, and then write the prayer you had. So I went back and I read all of those, and I pulled out the ones that were the same as either what's been in my journaling or what's been on the Dare to Dream. So I looked at that. And then we had a leadership retreat at the end of January, where the leaders took a full afternoon off, and part of that was to say, what do we think God is placing on our agenda? And there were quite a list there, and also a couple of weeks ago, I printed that so that you'd be informed of what's happening. So I'm going to share some of what seems to be bubbling to the surface, some suspicions of where God is heading us as a church that will actually affect how we operate. And that's not to impose it upon you, it's to invite you into the process of discernment. It's God's vision, it's discovered through prayer, and it's acknowledged or affirmed by the church body. So, I'm going to read to you. Sorry if I freak anyone out, because when I journal, I actually often write a conversation between God and myself. I'll ask a question, I'll write down what I think God is saying. That works for me. I'm not saying it is, thus saith the Lord, and it's not, I can't get it wrong. So I share it with you, but it's been helpful for me. About halfway through December last year, on the 18th, I felt God saying to me, as you pray for growth, be prepared to clearly articulate the values and the culture of the church, and also the vision of where I'm calling the church to go. Okay? And I believe he said, the current vision statement is too broad to inspire and fuel commitment. Grow, pray, connect, and reach out are foundations of culture, but vision is about a specific destination. People will not get on a train, even a comfortable train, unless they know the destination. That's a seed of gravity. And then retire the current vision statement. Articulate direction, destination. And then these phrases come. Multi-generational, multifaceted, multi-congregational, multi-use. Think on multi. So that's what happened for me, and I'll read one other excerpt from January, where I was speaking to God about that. Multi is methodological, not vision. In other words, doing things in multiple. That's about how you do it, it's not where. It says, I'm calling for multiple options to achieve the purpose. It's time for Boambi Baptist Community Church, to make a difference. I want BCBC, which is what we call ourselves, to be missed if it were to stop. At the moment, the wider community would not necessarily grieve your passing. They might be slightly saddened, but not devastated that we close our doors. Have a sense of God saying, time to come up from below decks, explore salt and light as it may, explore low profile, high impact, explore the multis. So that's a little bit of the crazy, if that's on the crazy fringe, I can own that. So what that has done, that's kick-started it. That's been reinforced. So the training that I'm ready to embark upon for consultants, which is a region-wide, the next thing we're going to do is about vision, values, and purpose. Not because of this, but because, and I thought, wow, that's a confirmation. I picked up a book that I'd read a year ago, and it says in order to move forward, you've got to clearly go back and articulate why we exist, the core values. And so I'm bombarded from every side to say this is on God's agenda. So what I want to share with you is, as we've looked at all those things, there's probably 40 or 50 different aspects as we've done my journaling and prayer events. Here are the themes, I've grouped them as themes, that I believe that God is placing on our agenda. One is to focus our energy towards discipleship, and that's captured in our purpose statement, making passionate followers of Jesus Christ. And last week I got you to fill out a bit of a thing of where are you at? What's the last 12 months been like for you? Are you in these different areas of spirituality? Are you growing? Are you static? Or does it drop back a little bit? And ask the question of what would it look like in the next 12 months for you to take one or two of those items and look to grow in that? I don't think that's not one program for the whole church. That's actually discipleship pathways that are as unique as the people here. So focus your energy on towards discipleship, a greater impact in outreach and increased outward focus. As I said, I've done this probably 30 or 40 times with different churches over the last 15 years or 20 years. I have never seen a church's vision that I thought was actually God's vision come out where a focus outward, an encouragement to go wider than just the four walls has not been part of the vision. Outreach is in the heartbeat of God. The next one was to broaden our focus wider than a Sunday morning event. So when we're growing, we won't measure how many people are in the room from 9:30 till 11 on a Sunday morning. We will measure how many people are we ministering to. Are they growing as disciples? Are we able to increase or grow in our ability to minister, to reach out in love? We'll measure those things, but sometimes that doesn't mean we might be, in 3 or 4 years' time, we might have the same number of people on a Sunday morning. But my suspicion is that we're going to have lots more connection with people. We're going to have deep, meaningful relationships with some of the people from youth, some of the people and the connections that we've had, say with Hopscotch or Mission Australia, or those kind of things. So broaden our focus. Just so you're aware, when we run a youth program, it's not to connect the adults so they come here on a Sunday morning. That if some of them choose that, then fantastic. I want that. I'm not trying to, and we're not going to lower our effort on a Sunday morning. We're going to improve it. But it's not just about Sunday morning. And another one is youth, children and families are to be a key focus. And again, we're not saying we will neglect other groups, but God has placed a heart in this church right across the ages that get excited when we see that ministry happening. We hear prayers like Noah. How old's Noah? 9. And a prayer that kind of takes your breath away. And we hear about our children. There's something when we run, I was reflecting, when Jono ran the first games in church, isn't that youth group stuff on a Friday night? But as long as they tidy up after themselves, that's an okay activity. You know? And the response back from some of our most senior people was not, that's an inappropriate expression. Worship was quite the opposite. Wasn't it wonderful to see the children involved? I think God has placed that in the heartbeat of who we are. And then that phrase, explore the multiple, the multi. So let me just quickly tell you what I think that looks like. And this is kind of still developing. You may have concepts or impressions, and there may be more to be added. But certainly multi-generational. The call that we're not meant to kind of, the children's program is not so that we get the kids out of church. And that's why we're doing morning tea in the middle, so that whole families can be part of a worship experience. That's multi-generational. That's why we do a Bible reading with a funny little comedy character, because that relates to the kids. And we have men, we have women, we have children, we have teenagers, we have retirees, we have people at every age of the spectrum ministering. Because part of what we've said is that age, gender and ethnicity will not be a barrier to ministry And so multi-generational, multifaceted, in other words, not looking at being expert in just one thing, not having the best worship team or the best preacher. I think we're safe on that. But there's lots of aspects to who we are. And that some of the growth is going to be in brand new things. Multi-use of the premises. Maybe this is why kind of be in my bonnet. I think we've got a great facility here. At the moment, John and I use it and Kathy uses it as an office a few times a week. We've got at the moment a small group that meet, and apart from that, the doors are shut. I think this is too great a resource. I loved it when Hopscotch came in because their building was damaged and we had this messy, crazy kind of thing with a preschool running out of here and blessing other people. You know, that excites me. So I think multi-use of the premises, multiple services and congregations. I expect that there will probably, as in the next couple of years, we will have numerous services, but I don't think they're going to be a repeat. It's not just a different time slot to do the same thing as here. It may not be even on a Sunday, and it may be to try and reach a whole different people for whom this would not work, and we'll see where that's going. I think the seeds have been sown in recharge. Multiple communication channels and multiple feedback loops. We want to stay open. We realise that not everybody gets emails, not everybody can read, not everybody's hooked in. We want to have multiple ways, so that could be visual, could be a better use of the website, but also feedback loops. We want to give you an opportunity to voice your input, your piece of the puzzle of where God is calling us to do, and multiple discipleship pathways. So, what I want to do is toss it back open to you, and I want you to use the second part of this sheet, because that says what aspect of today's sermon resonated with you. And I want you to rate my preaching. I'm fearful of that. But, and I've just put the dot points. That's the old. There you go. I will go back, so that's my thinking slide. I've updated it here and didn't do it on the other one. Let's go back to there, because they're the discipleship outreach, broadening our focus, youth and children, and exploring the multis. My guess is that some of those resonated with you and some of them left you cold. I want to hear which God's been speaking to you about. Which did you find that's the kind of church I want to be part of. So this is another part in prayerful consideration of where God is calling us to go. These are themes that we're looking to be either challenged or affirmed as we see it. And this will be an ongoing process for the next probably month or couple of months. We'll emerge out of this with a bit of an idea that will affirm as a church if that's what the future holds for us. We recognise that this is your church, not our church. We recognise that the vision you want is not our vision, but your vision for your church. We hope that it will give us focus and ability to know what to invest in and what to hold back from. And so in that process, we offer you these thoughts.